the show. Norm, how are you, mate?
Good, David. Thanks very much.
Mate, good to be here. Normie, can we maybe just start and pare back the early years of Norm Carr? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was your family life like before you ventured into the BRL? Can you just share a bit of insight into that area for us?
David, I was born in Sydney, actually, but I moved up here when I was 18 months old.
Okay.
My parents moved up here. My father was in the army. He was based at Enoggera. Moved into Anala at that time, and my mother still lives there now, 65 years later.
Wow.
Same house. That's a long time to be in the same area that people class. It was a new area growing at the time, and it certainly done me well to be growing up in that area.
So as a working class family, Norm, I assume you really had to earn your keep as a kid growing up, and your mum and dad were obviously long workers as well?
They were, yeah. There wasn't much money around in those days, and my father had to hitchhike to work every day for the first couple of years because never had a car, and he worked at Wollongabba from Anala.
Jeez.
That was every day and every night, so you just had to do that in those times.
Rugby league, Norm, was it always in your blood when you moved to Anala, or was your passion elsewhere when you were growing up as a kid, or was league always your go-to?
No, the league was. The local park was just down the road, about 100 metres away, and it was central to all the kids in that area. And you played the game down there, and it was tackle. There was no touch. Cricket pitches in the middle of the field, and they were concrete. And you could have been 4 stone 7, and the other blokes were 6 stone, whatever. The weight. If you sucked, you were just thrown off. You know what I mean? So you had to put up with that. You had to put up with it. So that's probably done me well later in life. That you just knuckled down and got into it. You didn't go off sucking all the time.
Gotcha. And your junior,
as a kid, I mean.
As a kid, yeah, sure. And your junior sides, Norm. Who was your first junior club? Living in Anala, was it South?
South Anala.
South Anala, who were very strong.
Yeah, they had a side, had a clubhouse. They're still there, actually, I think. And South Darra, I went to, played there. They folded. I ended up going to South Sunnybank after that, and that was up to 17s, under 17s. So I was virtually through the South area, and after I went to West Mitchie.
Why West, Norm? Why didn't you stay at South? How did you get to Mitchie from Anala?
My father drove me he enjoyed it. My father enjoyed rugby league, and he drove me there twice a week. But at that time, there was a coach called Barry Amar, and he over the years, I believe, like till about from under 15s to under 18s, he started putting a side together. And he started taking players from different suburbs and putting them together to make a great side in the under 18s.
For West?
For West Mitchie.
West Mitchie.
West Mitchie, yeah. Okay, there was a lot of great players in that side. There was John Rebo, Gary Prickett.
Wow.
Shane Dyson, myself, Nolly Birtwistle. I can't remember them all, but at this stage, and that side went on to win the grand final under 18s, and we played at Davies Park at the time, and normally the A grade side would get anywhere up to 2,000 people at a ground, and actually there was 3,000 on that day.
Jeez.
That the under 18 side played. It was a very strong competition. If you looked at players that from either club that went on to represent in the sense of playing A grade or reserve grade or representing Queensland or Brisbane, there was a very strong competition if you looked at those type of players that played for each club. I think that the players at the time were automatically went to the clubs that they were associated with, West Mitchie and West. I didn't go back to South.
I was just going to say, Norm, there was a lot of loyalty back then, wasn't there, back in the old BRL competition? Like you were just saying then, and Colin Scott and Alan Curry touched on it as well. If you played for a team, you sort of stayed there, but you were frowned upon if you went somewhere else. And I suppose that was in your case too, being the west-south sort of thing. There would have been a bit of, it was big news back then when you went to South.
Yeah. Well, that's a story down the track. We'll talk about that.
But,
the players were loyal. They definitely were. And it's not to say that they could have gone to other clubs and fitted in well. It just never happened. I mean, on the odd occasion, in the later stages, there's a few players that come from east over to west and vice versa, but it wasn't great exodus from clubs to go to other clubs. No,
yeah, that's right. Yep.
So, Normie, obviously that started the foundation of some of the West golden years, 75, 76. From that under-18 side, could you guys really then feel a nucleus of the players you had playing in 18s to really form that nucleus of those great West sides?
I wouldn't say that, David. We West were great in the early 70s, 74 when we went there from graduated from under 18s into senior football. We won last that year, in A grade, and didn't go so well in the lower grades either.
Right.
It's not that we had the depth or anything in there. We had some great name players still playing for the club. It's just it never worked. I think at the time, and it certainly changed in 75, but at the time, we were training twice a week. It's unheard of now. Twice a week. That was like a resort home. But we didn't know any difference. We're coming out under 18s into first grade or reserve grade or whatever. It was twice a week. That it was on the very odd occasion that we trained on an extra day. But certainly the following year things changed.
Yeah. Like looking at your 75 side and like some of the names, Harry Cameron, Wayne Stewart, Jeff Richardson, Greg Oliphant, yourself, Williamsons, Johnny Young, and Ronnie Raper as coach, some wonderful players and names there in that West side.
Yeah, the West at the time, and as I said, well, I was only a player. I wasn't there to what the selectors or the committee are doing at the time, but they certainly brought players into the club. We certainly had the depth in some areas, but it wasn't across the board. And I think, and they thought, well, if we're going to be competitive, we've got to buy players. And they went out and they bought some. It's not only just the Harry Camerons. There was Greg McCarthy, Gary Thomas. There was a lot of forwards they bought. Brian Asbesta, Johnny Armstrong. They bought a lot of players into West at the time to match up with the players they had, because it does show you back then you still needed depth in your club to win a premiership. You just couldn't do it with 13 players you had.
Well, Norm, Simo and I quite often touch on, and you can probably agree that in those days, winning the club championship was also a magnificent goal for a club to achieve as well.
That's right, Dave. If you go back and see who won the premierships in those days, you would tend to find that their reserve grade or C grade or under 23s were well up in the competition, or even won the competitions. The years of 75 and 76 when West won the premierships, I think it was in 75 that they won the competition in each grade.
They did.
I could be wrong, but in 76 they won it again in each grade except one, I think. The reserve grade, they were in the grand final and got beaten. Those sort of things. And I think if you look at South in 85, they had the same things, David. I think they got in their 4 divisions, 4 of them were both in the grand finals.
Correct.
All of them in the grand final and lost one.
Correct.
And I think that just shows now, even in the Brisbane competition or the NRL now, you just can't win a competition with 13 players. You need 25.
Yes,
all capable of playing first grade. And it was no different back then. We just had reserve grade and C grade,
True.
Norm, you were talking about the crowds before, like in the under 18s. So, you had the 3,000 supporters there, and Berkey and I sort of harp on this about how great the crowds were back then. What are some of your memories from those days, like when you finally went into A grade, when you were playing for West, and playing at Lang Park and playing at Purtell Park? Do you remember those massive crowds?
I certainly do, especially in the finals. But the things that you do miss in a way is the 4X beer stand on the hill. Attracted a lot of people. And if you went and played at Wynnum or played at those, you really didn't want to score a try in that corner where the can booths were. They certainly give it to you. But that's part of it. That's part you enjoy and probably miss at rugby league grounds now. Because the BRL certainly doesn't attract the crowds it used to.
Hey, Normie, can I pair back a bit? You mentioned a little while ago that you used to train basically 2 days a week during the year. Can you give the listeners a bit of an idea of a typical Norm Carr day when you were playing footy? I assume you had a normal job. So what did your sort of day look like leading up to training? You'd be up early, working, home, or straight to training. Can you give us a bit of insight of what your days were like back then?
Well, I won't start in 74. I started in 75 when Ron Raper came to West, and all of a sudden we've lobbed up for training and all that sort of stuff, and we've gone from two days a week the year before, and all of a sudden we're up to 4 and 5.
Wow.
And to start off, we used to run Mount Cootha in the pre-season.
Jeez.
Around there, and it was fairly hard to realise, and all of a sudden you're certainly training harder. We're doing weights now. West went and built a brand new training gym set up and put in a lot of effort in there and a lot of equipment to make the requirements to be able to be a good side or a side in the competition was competitive. So not only just physically doing the sort of running Mount Cootha, it was and doing weights and the training side of it, it was completely different. You're running 440s, and if you didn't do the job, you got penalised by the coach or whatever, and you had to put the extra effort in. In the penalty wasn't money; it was extra training and all these sort of things. So it was a certain eye opener when we've gone there, but it made us probably a lot harder in the mind, tougher in the mind, which you also need in rugby league. You don't have to be, physically 100% fit if you're not hard in the head too, in the mind, because it's not a soft sport, is it? Really, when you think about it.
Definitely.
The training was an eye opener. And a lot of people said, "What the hell's going on here?" But it didn't slacken off. He would train, like sometimes 6 days a week on a Saturday morning before we played on a Sunday. So he certainly brought not so much the money, but the professional training ethics to football. Ron Raper in Brisbane. And
you enjoyed him as a coach?
Certainly did.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, loyalty again. He was loyal to us. If he had a problem with you, he'd tell you straight up. He wouldn't mince around the books or with you. But he showed loyalty to you. Also, when you gave it back, and that was the whole spirit of the club.
Yeah, gotcha.
How was it back then, Norm, like training, all those nights, and you still had to go to work? Because back then, every BRL player, had a job. And I know of one player who actually had 3 jobs when he was playing in the BRL in the 80s. And for you to be training that many nights a week plus going to work, I mean, surely it must have had a toll on you by the end of the season.
Yes. Sometimes, I would start work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and finish probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go straight to training, because the being late wasn't tolerated. If you're down, you had to be down there 10 minutes before training started. If you arrived 10 minutes after, you just go and shake hands with the reserve grade coach. You know what I mean? That's what it was like. And that was the discipline, and everybody respected that. Then you would train, start at 6. You train through for 2 hours. Then you go up the shed, and then by the time you got home and had tea and all that, it'd be 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. That was on a regular basis. So
that's amazing.
But well, it is compared to what they do now. In the sense they do a lot of training, but they don't work either during the day. But that doesn't mean they don't do other things in the sense of education or those sort of things like that. You know what I mean? So, but being happy in doing those sort of things, and that's what was in the club at the time. People were happy about putting in, and they could see the results. So mentally it wasn't a problem because we've already done the tough and hard work in the pre-season.
Mount Cootha.
And
yes, and later on, when the smarter fellows there, because sometimes everybody has different paces of going around there. You know what I mean? Some blokes done it in 70 minutes or whatever, and some blokes would take 4 hours, but some of them woke up and took rolls of toilet paper and these sort of things, and you could hear the change rattling in their pockets when they caught they're running up and they catch a bus around. Those sort of things happen. That's true. That did happen.
Really?
And some people got lost trying to find shortcuts through the bush, and but there's some players like, I wouldn't like to say who their name is, but we used to send out search parties, with torches and all that, because they took so long to get back. But, when you look back, and it was fun, but probably at the time it was pretty hard work.
Yeah. So, mate, you talk about success. We move forward to 76, and that side, once again, the nucleus was there. Steve Creer came in. Gary Prickett was hooker. Interesting to look, Normie, that the premiership side of 76, you were on the bench, and a young John Rebo was like, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. But that's just the way it worked out at the time. I mean, like they have what they call a leadership or squad, players now. I don't know what they call them, but they get together. And at the time, I believe that unknown to me, but at the time that. I was told later that the leadership group got together and they thought it would be beneficial to have Rebo on first. So I come on in the second half, but Johnny Reeves at that time to start the competition. So we'll start the game that day, and it worked. So you can't argue.
No, you can't. But once again, a fantastic side. I mean, 16-1 in the grand final. It's an unusual scoreline. But once again, a terrific year and a real golden patch for West. Like that is a great side.
Yeah, it certainly was. As you mentioned earlier, Oliphant, Richardson.
Yeah.
Just trying to think of the bloke's name. Harry Cameron,
Steve Creer.
Stevie Creer. There's a bloke called Greg Heading.
And a young Mickey.
He played in the centres, and as I said, Gary Thomas, great fullback. Greg McCarthy.
Yeah, great fullback.
As good as Billy Slater. I mean, at the time, like he would just carve sides up in the mould of Billy Slater. I mean, chip over the top, chase balls down from kicks, you name it, he could do it. And he was a great player at the time. Great wingers. Wayne Stewart kick a goal from anywhere on the field. You know what I mean? So everything was going. The side we had was great across the park.
If you look at that footage, Norm, from that 76 grand final, and you're talking about Greg McCarthy, mate, he was head and shoulders above, a lot of those players on that day. He, like you said, he just carved the Tigers up. He was just unbelievable that day. He was,
just a great player. I mean, like he could just step on a dime, turn around, do things that you wouldn't be able to do. And this is at full pace.
Yeah.
I mean, like as I said, like Billy Slater. I mean, he just does things that you shake your head about when you see them.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Greg McCarthy was doing that 40 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why his nickname was Slippery.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right though. Yeah.
Normie, can we fast forward a little bit to your Queensland days? And it's 40 years, July 8th, since the first Origin. Pre-Origin, how is your recollection of your times in the Queensland side before Origin? Did you enjoy your years leading up to 1980 playing for Queensland?
Well, I certainly did, David. It was, although we didn't win too many games, I think in that years I got selected in '76 through Queensland not going well in the first one or two games, or the first game got beaten. Ian Tiney was the lock at the time.
Yeah.
And I actually happened to play well for West at the time in '76 and got selected. I put it down too, and I've always said, my father always said, to be a footballer, you need three things, and that's ability, you need dedication, and you need luck. If you haven't got the whole three of them, you won't get there. And it could be luck by, as I said, Ian Tiney or Queensland getting beaten, and me having a strong game. Or luck comes in a lot of shapes. It could be bad luck too, that you break a leg or do things like that, and you don't fulfil your potentials. And that's down to luck. I think in the game, or lucky that the three Queensland selectors or something like that are there at the time that you had the good game. Luck plays a big part in it.
That's a good point.
How were you with injuries, Norm, during your career? Did you get many bad injuries at all, or were you pretty lucky? Because we're just talking about that luck.
No, well, I had a couple of small side ligament. I think they call them median, not crucial, median ones on the side. Yeah, it wasn't much. I had a broken arm and virtually finished my Queensland career. Broke my arm that year, and a bloke, I think it was Paul Morton, might have come in over the top. So other than that, I had a very good career, in the sense of luck. And sports medicine was just starting in the BRL back then. We used to, the runners used to run on with the same rag they used to, wipe the ground with, you suck on this for a while, that's how the water come on, those sort of things. Sports, like strapping of the ankles, wasn't heard of back then. That was what's the name that was brought into West at the time, or around about that time. I cannot remember off the top of my head, but the doctors, you talk about players in '74 where John Sattler, there was a big fight at West at the time between him and Russell Hughes. It went on for 20 minutes. Okay, and I was up in the grandstand. Up in the shed at the time, and Sattler gets, comes up there. He's got a big split over his eye, and the doctor comes up to us and says, "Yeah, hold me beer while I stitch him up." You know what I mean? And then they started the potato sack stitching. You know what I mean? They put about 3 or 4 stitches in for a cut that was about 3 inches long.
Oh.
These days now they put about 400. It was a little bit different back then. Luck changed with injuries and all that. They've become a lot better at managing injuries, not like they are today, in the sense that they're so advanced today to what they were back then. You know what I mean? Like they're still putting heat on injuries instead of ice, these sort of things like that. You know what I mean? So it certainly changed. The whole era of Brisbane Rugby League started to change from about '75 on, with sports medicine, training methods, these sort of things like that. So in those early stages, luck sometimes didn't have a lot to do with it. It was just bad management by people at the time, you know what I mean?
Simo, do you want to touch on with Norm the research you've done this morning around the BRL team of the 70s?
Yeah, Norm, you might remember that 4BC, the listeners called in, and I think it was around about 2005 time that happened. But you made the team of the year for the 70s in the BRL, as according to the listeners. Well, it was a pretty good team. I'll just run through a couple of names. I won't go through the whole squad, but you had guys like Jerry Fitzpatrick from Valleys, Rossi Strudwick at half, Des and Rod Morris and John Lang, Greg Vivers, Lou Platts from Wynnum, yourself. You took out the lock of the 70s, and then down on the reserve bench, you had blokes like Tony Obbs, John McCabe, and the coach of the year. Or the coach of the 70s, I should say, was Henry Holloway from Valleys. So
Henry, I remember Henry well.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at those, those guys. Ian Bunny Pearce, another one, the fullback. We're talking about fullbacks before. I mean, you're in the company of some amazing players from that time, mate. And Berkey could probably back me up here, mate. Those guys. I mean that. I have no issue with that team that was put together by the listeners, mate, and you were really fondly looked upon by the supporters. Every person that you will speak to knows who you are, remembers how tough you were. You were just a really good all-rounder, as far as I was concerned, and you thoroughly deserved that place in that 70 side, mate.
You just touched on a word, toughness. And toughness comes across in different ways. I mean, there's certainly players that I regard as tough in the sense of blokes like Rod Bradshaw, who used to play second row for West. He wasn't a big fella, but he played week in, week out, trained hard, and never complained one time at all. And he was, as I said, he wasn't a big fella, but he had a big heart. And you knew he was going to do his job every time. Now, to do that is pretty tough in my considerations. But you talk about Greg Vivas. In '76 when we were playing for Queensland and then New South Wales, we had players from the country, myself, young players in there, and he would be belted by the New South Wales pack. They never took it back with that. You know what I mean? And he's showing the young blokes and the blokes from the country. And you've got to understand that the blokes from the countries, we were training 5 days a week. They were training 2, you know what I mean? So their fitness levels weren't up there, you know what I mean, at the time. But that was tough. When you're playing against the best players in the world, or supposedly in the world at the time, and he kept on taking the ball up, doing things, leading us on. That's toughness. You know what I mean? So there's different levels of it. Blokes like Bobby Green, and I'm probably biased and I'm favouring my
not at all.
Been with, you know what I mean? Chris Phelan. I remember a time about Chris Phelan that we're playing at Davies Park and we've kicked off. He was a lock for South. And what you always done is you try to always get over the top of your opposition player. So they've kicked the ball off to him. We kicked the ball off and he's taken it on the full and I've just creamed him. I just give him everything, in those days you can. And I stood over the top of him and he had to crawl out from underneath my legs. But, the whole thing was that the next 79 minutes, he's gained 3 metres in pace and belted me every time for 79 minutes in the game. So, that's another bit of toughness. After, you give it to him, you think, well, I've got over the top of him. He's just made me look bad to the rest of the game, 79 minutes. So, it's when people talk about toughness, there's different requirements in it.
Normie, if we can move forward to 1980, and obviously first Origin game, can you give us some insight into the lead up to the first Origin, how you found out, just some memories around that first week and that first game?
Well, I'll just go back a step prior to that, to the 2 state games before, and to give you an idea how things started to change. Back then, we got an allowance off the QRL, and these are things that I'm trying to get in my memory straight, but it could be a little bit of miscalculation in cost and all those sort of things. But I think at the time, were $250 a win and $250 a loss and $500 a win. So we never got to the 500 a lot at the time. But they used to give us an allowance, from work. And I think off the top of the head, it was about $100, I think, a day.
Okay.
But in that, you had to buy your own tea.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
And
after each game or whatever game, we would get a bathtub in somebody's room and put a couple of cartons of beer in there, and that was our celebrations or whatever after the game. You know what I mean? So step up to the Origin that happened, and all of a sudden we're staying in the 5-class hotels, and I think that was correct, 5-star, or we might have been still at the Melbourne Hotel. I can't remember off the top of the head, but it was $1,500 a game, win, lose or draw.
Jeez.
You know what I mean? That's a big step up.
Big jump.
That's a lot of money to blokes back in our day, 40 years ago. And then the fees, feed 3 times a day, it was terrific. You know what I mean? So it certainly changed the from state football, where Ron McAuliffe recognised the same problems that we were recognising. We're getting beaten, and nobody did give a shit about it, really. Because they just wanted the competition to go along the way it was. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, Ron McAuliffe, in his wisdom, changed and said, "I'm sick and tired of getting beaten. Let's make ourselves professionals," and started paying the money. And if you look at the side that played in the first State of Origin, I think there was only 4 players that were different. There wasn't that many player changes in the actual side that got beaten in the first state game.
State game of that year.
Rod Reddy, Arthur Beeton, who I think they pulled out of reserve grade, Johnny Lane, and Greg Oliphant. I think that were the only 4 players off the top of my head. There could have been another one, but the nucleus of the side already played in the state games. Yeah,
gotcha.
So what they've done, I believe, is just brought a belief into the side.
And did you feel the belief? Did you feel the belief when you turned up that week, seeing Arthur, Rod Reddy, and those guys on your side for a change, and not getting belted by them?
Well, not really first up. It happened when the question was asked, what moves are we going to be putting on against New South Wales? And Rod Reddy said at the time, what moves have you been doing? He said, well, if you do it right and correct, it doesn't matter who you play against. That's all you got to do. So we put the same moves on that we did against New South Wales in the state game. So he's just brought the belief that if you do everything correct, you'll win the game.
Yeah. It's simple, isn't it?
There's a lot of other things.
Sure.
Just believe that if you do it right, you're going to win.
Yeah. So now, looking at the game, I mean, you obviously never made it on the field. Do you have any if-only moments that you maybe wish you could have taken the field that night, or you're quite comfortable with how it unfolded?
Well, it was late. I think Rowan Hancock went down injured with about 10 minutes to go. And I'm thinking to myself, it's cold, I'm sick, all this sort of shit. I've already got the $1,500. The beer's cold inside, and I'll get a hot shower. You know what I mean? I'm saying to myself, get up, Rowan. You know what I mean? Get up. He's actually got up. I've got you beauty. I in the dressing shed when the boys come in and they're all hot and sweaty, and I'm just relaxed. I got the $1,500 in my pocket.
Kick. That's good.
Yeah, so life is good, but now I regret not
Sure.
getting on the field. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you know, at the time, you say it, and you got to think about it. Football was getting more professional, and you realise, you know, coming off the bench with the way you were back then, because you never done any. You never, you know, a stretch would be flexing your fingers or something like that. You know what I mean? That, you know, and getting on there, you're going to cause yourself more damage in those type of incidents than anything else. You know, but you know, so be it. That's the way it happened, and I do have a regret about that.
Okay. So, mate, a great win. Can you maybe enlighten us post-game about, and we've spoken about this, but you tell our listeners about Jack Gibson's shoes.
Jack Gibson's shoes, I think. Yeah, well,
After the game.
Yeah, it wasn't after that game. I think it was after a earlier game, a state game. I'm not sure now what game it was, but certainly Arthur Beeton was around at the time, and I'm glad he was. At the time, old Jack had his, you know, like when you're having a few drinks around people, you start to get a bit close. You wouldn't survive on the pandemic days now, but back then you'd be, you know, talking straight into his eyes, you know what I mean, like that. But I didn't realise Jack liked shoes at the time, and he had his crocodile shoes on, and I'm standing all over him, and you know, he's virtually said to me, you know, lucky you're a friend of Arthur's, because, you know, I can't remember the right word, but lucky you're a friend of Arthur's, or you'd be on the ground now, you know what I mean? So, well, I'm standing all over his crocodile shoes, yes. I think Arthur's got that in his, he's written up that in the book, and I don't know if his record of it is 100% correct. It's probably better than mine anyhow.
Yeah.
So, mate, moving on, I mean, obviously from then you played three full Origin games for 3 wins, 81-82. So you could see that, as you rightly said, the momentum and the pendulum was starting to swing a lot more towards Queensland sides post that first game.
No, well, David, that's, you know, back to what I said. They had a belief in winning, and it did come up, and the arrogance of New South Wales, if you want to call it for that, you know, I mean, just think we shouldn't have been in the competition, you know what I mean? They didn't care about us, you know. Any games that we played in New South Wales, nobody in New South Wales Rugby League, other than junior clubs like South Sydney Juniors, would entertain you. They would look after you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a junior club. The NRL, or whatever you wanted to call them back then, they didn't give a stuff about you. You know what I mean? And really now, I think it took about 5 or 6 years for New South Wales to realise what was happening. They got ambushed by their own, you know, by who they thought they were their own players. But if you look back on sides that were playing around there, the majority of people still come out of the Brisbane competition.
Yeah, good point.
Or Queensland competition. There were country boys there too, you know what I mean? I'm just not saying Brisbane competition. So, you know, I mean, like, it's not just the fact of being beaten, it's the way they looked at you, the way you treated.
Yeah.
You know, second-class citizen or something back then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the sense that your competition wasn't as good. And it probably wasn't to the sense when the AMCO Cup and those competitions were around. We were competitive for a while, but the fitness and the strength of New South Wales was totally too good for the clubs. But when they amalgamated the clubs into a Brisbane side, the players are certainly Brisbane standard, but when they got together, they were quite capable of beating the New South Wales club sides.
Good point. Hey, Norm, can we maybe just move forward to your year at West in 84? I mean, probably from my recollection at that stage, West were sort of on a decline. And in 84, obviously, where was your mind at before you got the knock on the door to come to South?
Well, I got the knock on the door from West and said, listen, we don't require you next year.
Really?
I said, let's, you know, it was just I was 29-year-old or 30, I can't remember rightly. been at the club at that time 12 or 13 years. Riley, it's the club pays you the money, and if they don't want you, they don't want you. And that's fair enough. They let me know that, and at the time, then retirement was in my mind.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, hang on, the other knock come from the other door, and I went over to South to talk to Wayne Bennett, and well, that's history now. You know what I mean? Again,
how did that unfold, Norm? So the conversation with Wayne, did he reach out to you? Did he get wind of you that West had let you go, or was that before you found out West didn't want you?
No, that's afterwards, I believe. I can't recollect how it fell into the holes, but I just had a meeting with Wayne at the time, and I don't know where he got the information from. It was pretty straightforward, and we just took it from there. One of the things I did say to Wayne, and he asked, "Why do you want to play with South?" And I just said, I said to him straight up, I think I can win you a grand final. Those are the words, and it come true. Thank Christ for that.
Thank Christ for that. Because obviously at the end of 84, Souths were flogged 42-8. So there was, starting back in 85, and I was there with you at that time, there was a lot of second guessing about how we're going to go in 85 after Wynnum had flogged us. But then you came in, Chrissy Phelan came in, Johnny Elias came up, and also Wayne Cullen came in, and there's suddenly a lot of strength and belief that we could do it. And through no understatement of your leadership, I think in 85, and you use that word belief, I think that's what you put into these boys was the belief word.
Well, the hard thing about it, I said earlier, is that you can certainly have great players across the board, but you've got to have the right great players. You know what I mean? And I think South did have a lot of good players in 84. They just didn't have the right players. You know what I mean? Like the right toughness of play. They talk about Chrissy Phelan. Johnny Elias brought other things to the club. Wayne Cullen brought things to the club. And myself, you know what I mean? There wasn't great difference to the side that played in 84. It's just that they played against a great side too.
Yeah, true.
The side they played against was a very good side, you know what I mean? And they didn't probably have, you had young players in your side that eventually, 2 years later are playing for Australia. You know what I mean? They lacked probably leadership or that toughness that we were talking about earlier, that week in, week out toughness of players, that fronted up every day, every game, 80 minutes a game. And I think they might have been lacking that just in the youth side in the 84 to 85.
Yeah, good point.
In 85, Norm, how hard was it to come up against West for that first time? You've been at West for so long, now a Magpie. That first game that you played against the Panthers, was it everything that you expected? Did they throw everything at you?
No, not really. No, not really. It, being the age I was at the time, like if you thought, I learned smartness rather than toughness, I used to hide on the blind side. Look a bit tough and send the other forward, get over there and do this, make a few tackles there while I'm having a bludge. But that was the advantages of being captain, I suppose. Being smart enough to get away from the heavy work. But it's. As I said, 84 with South was a great, they were a good side, very good side, name-wise. But at the time, they just weren't ready to win a grand final.
Yeah.
With the players. And I think Bobby Linder went to Wynnum
Yep,
84, and he got a few injuries on the way. But with Wynnum on that, the next year they fronted up again. But that side was virtually the same side that won the competition in 84. South weren't. You know what I mean? And players like, as I said, Johnny Elias brought different things to the club. Chris Phelan, a lot of people talk about legends of the game. Have they ever analysed what Chris Phelan has done in his career? I think if you look at it just off the top of my head in senior competition, and he played in a grand final in '81 with South, winning grand final, went to Parramatta, and he was playing lock-up here. And went to Parramatta, and they won 3 grand finals down there in a row, and he was playing front row.
Yeah,
well,
true.
A little bit different. And then he's come back a year in '85 and won another grand final. So you tend to think sometimes you worry about, what sort of criteria you need to be a legend of the game.
Yeah. Well, just for the record, Norm, with you making that 70 side, Chris Phelan actually made the team of the 80s. So he did get some notoriety in the end, like he made that 80s side. So that was from the listeners again who'd called in to 4BC. So he was well looked after, like well looked upon by the fans out there. Like you said.
No, he should be.
Yeah, definitely.
He was a very, very good player in the sense of straight up and down. I'm not saying we wondered at the time in '81 when Mickey Reardon scored a try for South in the corner, and we couldn't believe that Chris Phelan passed the ball. He was just straight up and down. Take it forward. That's but you need those type of players in your side, and that's in '85. That's all we needed, and I think, and probably advancing a little bit down the track, is that in the early parts of the season, Wayne Bennett said we got beaten 42 or whatever it was in '84 by Wynnum. All I want to do is, if we win them in the first game, is if we get beaten, I don't want it beaten anymore, but we want to be beaten less than those scores. And the main aim wasn't to beat Wynnum first up, because Wayne probably realised we couldn't do it at that time. But if you look through the records of that year, the first game we got beaten, I think the second game we got beaten, and the third game we beat them. And then we fronted them in the grand final and won it. So the method of Wayne was thinking at the time certainly worked. Because there's no use winning, beating Wynnum Manly 3 times during the year and then get beaten at the end when it counts.
Yeah.
Normie, just speaking of coaches, and you've been coached by some legends, who would you rate as your best coach? Is there anyone that really resonates that you really felt connected with?
Well, you talk about Ron Raper. He certainly developed my attitude to football, in the sense, not so much the skills, but he developed my determination and all those sort of things just through training in the professional and being thorough. When he first come to West, we were back playing the ball, learning to play the ball, because mistakes cost you games. Yeah. And if you can't play the ball properly, what's the use of doing all the rest right? Catching the ball. We went through these sort of things, just the small skills that junior football, and I mean junior football under 6 do. How to play the ball properly, how to catch the ball, how to tackle properly. All those sort of things he brought back into the training field. With certainly training methods that we didn't like, running Mount Cootha or running the steps around Red Hill. Those sort of things like that. But and he brought in penalties if you didn't perform. And
discipline.
And he certainly brought professionalism in the sense to the game, and that made you realise what's required to stay at the top or get to the top.
Yeah. When we spoke to Alan Curry recently, we asked Alan who he enjoyed most playing against, and he named you and Ian Tiny. I mean, is there certain opponents that you really relished the challenge?
Well, I always wanted to get over the top of my opposition player. So you target, for whatever reason, you target your opposition player, the lock or whatever. So who I like playing against, Des Morris.
Yeah, okay.
Stopping Des Morris, because he was a great ball player, Des Morris. He's very good with his fullbacks down the blind side. So you always try to get the Des before he could unload the ball. And if you'd done that, you felt good in yourself that you're doing your job. Wally Lewis, getting over the top of Wally, very hard to do, but before I scored the try in that
85.
grand final, I mean, I think I accidentally pushed him off, but really it was a good palm, I thought, at the time.
It was.
But,
It was.
it was great to look back and see Wally on the ground, you know what I mean? So it doesn't happen that many times.
Yeah, good.
But, those sort of things you're quite happy about and enjoy doing. Playing with some great players. Jeff Richardson, he was probably magic with the ball. What he could do and create with the ball, he was, you can't be too bad if you represent Australia in rugby union and rugby league. You know what I mean? So you've got to have something going for you. And he was good to watch, and he was unbelievable with the ball.
Yeah. Hey, Normie, can we maybe get close to finishing off with a couple of things? Can we maybe lighten it up? And there's a lot of people that always ask Normie, but can you talk to us about Jeffrey?
Jeffrey. Yeah.
Honestly, these are the iconic things about the BRL, the Jeffreys, the Happy Jacks, those types of guys made the comp the way. And Jeffrey absolutely idolised you. But what's the background with that? Where did that all start from?
Well, I can't honestly tell you where it started from, but Jeffrey, Normie Carr. Yeah. But he not only he would follow the game anywhere. When the clubs West started, or the competition started playing in the bush and against the bush, he would be on the bus. He would follow there. If he couldn't get the bus, he would catch the train there. And I'm talking about Bundaberg, and all of a sudden Jeffrey would be there. You need those type of followers.
Definitely.
You need the characters. You don't only just need the characters in on the field. You certainly need them in the crowd. You need those people who enjoy the game, and he certainly enjoyed it. I don't know honestly why I was picked out at the time by Jeffrey, but he certainly knew all my family, knew everything about it, had posters, these sort of things. But if you'd done it now, you'd be called stalking. You know what I mean? Like those sort of things. But Jeffrey he was very good. He appreciated what he was doing, and he was a great supporter of the club.
Yeah,
both clubs.
Just a fun fact there, Norm. He's actually still the mascot for West in the BRL competition. They made the grand final last year, and he led them out. He was in a Panthers suit. He was dressed up as a Panther, and he ran out, and then he took the head off of the mascot, and he was yelling out Panthers up and down the sideline. So he's still around, and he's still a West tragic.
Yeah, no, that's good. And as I said, then the BRL needs more of those people. You know what I mean? And
absolutely.
Jeffrey at the time, was not only loyal to the club, he helped the club. He would be helping the people in the canteens. He would be doing these other things. You know what I mean? Like selling raffle tickets and those sort of things. It just wasn't a fan going around the club enjoying the football. He enjoyed the social life of the clubs, and that's probably what these clubs at this time. There's no social life in the football, and that's what clubs relied on. At West at its height, and this new club back then in '75, and they used to get 1,500 people to a concert or whatever they had there, and that's on top of the game day. There's other people there. It was just fantastic people who would go to West from Wynnum or East or these sort of places that, or after a game that you had at West and you played Valleys. The players would stay there and they would have a feed there and they would have a drink and they would socialise with each other, the different clubs. I don't think that happens now, So the social side of football was a big benefit to the community and the clubs.
Yeah.
Normie, just on your thoughts about the game today, I mean, what are your feelings about the game right now? Watching it.
Well, they get paid. No, I've got to say they get paid too much. And no, they probably get paid what they should get paid. But I don't think the Australian Australian society can afford all these clubs that are professional. So it makes that cost to players getting $1 million seem absurd, because it does, in the sense that the money that footballers have got to spend, or the clubs have got to spend now, is just ridiculous. I think, and it's shown that it's unaffordable.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say. You don't begrudge the players of getting anything these days. You know what I mean? Okay, they're putting their body on the line. The sports medicine is a lot better for them now. If they turn 65 like I am and got bad knees and bad backs and bad necks, you say, shit, I need more money. But back then you're just happy to play the game. Like, I think my first sign-on fee was $650.
Jeez.
And I won't tell you what my top money was, but it took me about 5 years to get it out of West. And it's not their fault either. That's the way it was at the time. And if you go back over the periods of West from the 70s to the 90s, they were in a few grand finals.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
Very strong in the competition. So they might have had the dips sometimes in the 80s, but very strong in the 90s, early 90s, and then all of a sudden they fell away because financially it costs a lot of money to win a grand final.
Yeah, very true.
Regardless of like Sydney to Brisbane, you've still got to play the players, and if they're only on winning bonuses if they win all the time, you've still got to pay the money.
Good points, Normie. Hey, Simo, any final thoughts, mate?
If there's just Norm, just one question I've got, mate. If there's one memory of the old BRL competition that you have, a good memory, what is it?
Well, it's hard to say. Like, one memory I do have, and it's probably not a good memory for the person, but we're playing a game, and I got penalised by a referee, and like, I got up saying, look, you're nothing but an idiot, like, giving the penalty, and the referee said, who are you talking to? And Rod Bradshaw turned around and said, well, you're the only one that answered. But as I said, in the BRL, the competition was good. You respected the players.
Yeah.
Okay, we're all in the same boat. There was no $1 million players or anybody that wasn't working and just live off the money they're getting through football. Everybody was going through the same sort of things. You know what I mean? So across the board, the playing platform was even. And you respected your players. As I said, you had the socialising between the clubs was great. If you met somebody at a dinner or something like that, you would have a conversation with them. You wouldn't turn your back on them or do anything like that. You know what I mean? So the football at the time was a very good social community sort of hub in the BRL. That was great about it. We still now, after 40 years, still talk to players that we played against now. Played against then. So that's one big memory I got out of that. You met a lot of friends. Yeah. Sometimes you just don't, keep up with them, but that was the whole thing about it. The players are loyal in your club. Okay, there wasn't too many players that went away. They either retired or died, or something like, but they never left the club. You know what I mean? So the club was the foundation of that community, that area.
Well said, mate.
Yeah. Norm, we just wanted to reach out, mate. Thank you so much for today. I mean, the richness of some of the things you spoke about, the iconic status you had with a lot of BRL supporters in the 70s and 80s, mate. We just want to thank you so much for your time today on When They Were Kings. Stay in good health. to you and your family, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks very much, boys. And I'd like to say one thing. Maybe the things I said are my opinion and probably not the truth.
Thanks again, Normie.
Thanks,
All
Norm.
right, boys.
See you, mate.
Catch you later. Thank you.
Bye.
See you. Bye.